Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a truly fascinating and honestly, a super urgent journey. We are going to look at how the ancient, classical prohibitions of interest are clashing head-on with the fast-paced, ruthless world of modern algorithmic digital lending. We're going to break down exactly how we can confront these predatory loan apps. And spoiler alert, it's not just about slapping on more rules and regulations. It's about actually building superior, ethical technological alternatives. So if you want to understand the future of ethical fintech, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get started. To understand where we're going, we first have to ground ourselves in the absolute foundation of Islamic finance. The prohibition of riba, or usury, is extremely well known. Every Sharia economist knows this. The millions of Muslims using digital loan apps know this too. It's not a secret. But here's the hard, on-the-ground reality. Just knowing something is prohibited doesn't magically pay for a midnight medical emergency, right? When someone needs cash instantly, and the only lifeline available is a 5-minute digital loan on their phone, a theological prohibition doesn't solve their immediate crisis. And that sheer desperation leads us directly to this staggering number, 109.5%. Let that sink in for a second. That is the actual annual interest rate tied to some of the predatory digital loan apps, often called pinjol in Indonesia, operating out there today. I really want to emphasize this point. It is financial desperation, a literal lack of alternatives, not a lack of faith, that drives millions of people right into these debt traps. So we've got to move way beyond just saying this is prohibited. We have to construct real, viable solutions. To tackle this, here's our game plan for today. First, the predatory lending trap. Second, defining modern digital riba. Third, the 2-layer regulatory framework. Fourth, 4 Islamic fintech alternatives. And finally, the roadmap to freedom. All right, part 1, the predatory lending trap. Let's look at exactly what we're up against when we talk about these algorithm-driven loan sharks. Okay, let's dive into this. The classical fiqh definitions, Islamic jurisprudence, were actually incredibly precise for their medieval context. They focused heavily on simple interest added due to time delays, or an excess in the exchange of similar goods. But here's the problem. Those ancient rules really struggle to catch the shape-shifting, complex architecture of 21st century digital lending. Today's predatory platforms completely obscure their exploitation. They don't just hand you a contract and say, hey, here's your interest rate. No way. Instead, they use hidden flat administrative fees. They use layered, multiplied late penalties and fee structures scattered across so many tiny line items that calculating your true annual cost is almost impossible. Plus, thousands of these platforms operate entirely illegally anyway, completely dodging standard regulations from the get-go. Which brings us to Section 2, defining modern digital riba. Because if we can't properly identify the modern mechanics of this exploitation, we definitely can't regulate them. Enter an entirely new operational framework, the at-Tawazun al-Banyawi, or structural balance proposal. This framework is a real game changer because it pins down exactly what makes an app predatory using 5 concrete empirical criteria. First, an excessive effective cost, basically proposing that anything over a 36% annual percentage rate is a red flag. Second, misleading fee structures deliberately designed to hide the total cost. Third, and this is truly sinister, the coercion of personal data. We're talking about apps scraping a borrower's contacts or photos to use for public shaming during collection. Fourth, using algorithms specifically programmed to target individuals in financial distress. And fifth, structural rollover spirals. This means they make repayment nearly impossible, but extending the loan, super easy. This definition is revolutionary because it's substantive. It identifies exploitation by its actual real-world impact on the user, not just by whatever legal label is slapped on the contract. Section 3, the 2-layer regulatory framework. Because, as we just established, simply banning these apps doesn't suddenly erase human desperation. Think of regulators needing to act as both a shield and a builder. Layer 1 is the shield, prohibitive regulation. We absolutely need mandatory APR caps of 36 to 48%, total cost transparency, strict prohibitions on that coercive data access we talked about, and mandatory audits of those targeting algorithms every 2 years. But here's the catch. Prohibition without alternatives just creates black markets. That's exactly why Layer 2 is the builder, regulation driving alternatives. Regulators have to actively nurture ethical competition. They can do this by creating Islamic fintech sandboxes with lower capital requirements, allowing zakah funds to be used as first loss capital to protect the lenders who are actually serving the poorest segments, and mandating very transparent social impact reporting. Let's move to Section 4. 4 Islamic fintech alternatives. These are the actual technological swords that can step in and replace predatory apps in the real world. Model A is value-based Islamic peer-to-peer lending. Now, conventional P2P just uses interest as a pricing mechanism to connect borrowers and investors. But this model, take a look at a platform like Capital Boost operating in Southeast Asia, it fundamentally changes the entire architecture. It connects investors who want social impact directly with micro merchants who need capital, but it uses actual profit and risk-sharing mechanisms. So returns are based on a percentage of the actual business profits, not some predetermined fixed interest rate. It literally turns debt trading into a true business partnership. Model B takes this concept even further. It pairs Islamic finance with blockchain. And when you think about it, blockchain's inherent traits, things like immutability, decentralization, and absolute transparency, they perfectly align with Islamic values. By tapping into decentralized finance, or DeFi, smart contracts can automatically execute those profit-sharing agreements, ensuring there are absolutely zero hidden fees. Platforms like Fintera are already showing us how blockchain can be used to manage zakah and crowdfunding with total open book transparency. It makes it an incredible tool for financing Muslim micro-enterprises without any risk of tampering. Model C is incredibly powerful because it beautifully digitizes existing cultural networks. This is the mosque-based digital card Hassan. Inspired by the massively successful offline Ahwat model in Pakistan, this approach uses local mosques and community centers as hubs for verifying trust. A digital platform then acts as the spoke for processing and dispersing zero-interest loans, which are funded by a sustainable revolving waqf or charitable endowment fund. It's brilliant because it doesn't try to replace human relationships with cold algorithms. Instead, it uses technology to scale that communal trust. That makes it perfectly suited for the truly unbankable folks who completely lack standard credit scores. And finally, Model D, Islamic FinTech RegTech. Now, this one isn't a lending platform itself. Instead, think of it as the software engine that keeps the whole shebang clean. It utilizes smart contracts to effectively hardwire Sharia compliance right into the product lifecycle. This RegTech automatically calculates and displays true, transparent APRs, it generates real-time distributive impact data, and it instantly blocks any hidden mechanisms that fall into our new operational definition of digital Riba. It really is the ultimate automated compliance tool for both regulators and ethical platforms alike. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the roadmap to freedom. We have the models, we have the regulations, but how do we actually get there? Well, before we build the future, we have to rescue the people who are drowning right now. That brings us to liberation loans. Again, taking a massive cue from the Akawat Foundation, these are 0% APR loans explicitly designed for one incredibly compassionate purpose: to pay off a borrower's existing high-interest predatory debt and free them from the snare entirely. The only condition? The borrower joins an economic empowerment program supported by Productive Waqf. It is an immediate, life-saving financial intervention that actively reconstructs economic solidarity. And these liberation loans kick off a very realistic 7-year progression. Phase 1, covering the first 2 years, is stabilization. This means enforcing those APR caps and setting up sandboxes just to stop the bleeding. Phase 2, years 2 to 4, is substitution, where we actively scale up that mosque-based Model C and start piloting the P2P Model A. And finally, Phase 3, years 4 to 7, is transformation. This is where these alternative models become the principal nationwide financial ecosystem for lower-income segments. And we'll know it's working by measuring a massive, undeniable reduction in predatory app usage. Now, if you're sitting there wondering if there's actually a viable audience for all this, look at this number, 1.4 billion. That is the number of unbankable Muslims globally who currently have basically no real choice but to turn to predatory lending. The data actually shows that 56% of Muslim millennials actively want to use Islamic digital banking services, yet a third of them have absolutely no access to it. So this isn't just a regulatory challenge, folks. It is an incredibly massive, totally untapped market for developers and investors. Which leaves us with this final, crucial thought. We have defined the problem, we've mapped out the regulatory shields, and we've blueprinted the actual fintech builders. 1.4 billion people are waiting in financial desperation for an ethical alternative to these predatory algorithms. The technology exists right now. The models are totally proven. So the only question remaining is, who is going to step up and build it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it sparked some ideas for you. I'll catch you next time.